Bigger and better. Tweed Airport in New Haven is in the process of expanding, and tonight neighbors will have the chance to weigh in. Your reporter Owen Kingsley looking ahead to a large public meeting. And Owen, those plans have really been met with a lot of pushback and concern. What's going on here?
Oh, they sure have. If you live in New Haven in Ward 18, you're going to want to listen up. Tonight, there is a public meeting where they're going to talk about those latest expansion plans to add more planes, more parking. But for a lot, as you mentioned in this neighborhood, what that really means is more noise and more traffic. Costing hundreds of millions of dollars, Tweed Airport has their eyes set on adding a new terminal, more parking areas, and an expanded runway to support larger planes coming from further away. The plan is also supposed to improve traffic congestion in the Morris Cove neighborhood. The massive project is still waiting for final zoning approval, but has been approved by New Haven, East Haven, and the Airport Authority. The people fighting back are the ones who have called this area home for years, listening to the sounds of planes overhead, battling traffic congestion in this suburb, and fearful for what more planes and people would do to their neighborhood. Well, tonight is your opportunity to speak up. They'll be laying a little bit more details about their expansion plans and how they're going to address some of these concerns. The public is also welcome at the end of the meeting to ask questions to folks behind this expansion plan. That meeting is at 6 o'clock tonight over at the Nathan Hale School. Your reporter live in New Haven, I'm Owen Kingsley, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
All right, Owen, thank you.